I think what's going to happen nearer term is the U.S. has a lot of money. It can raise a lot of money, it can spend a lot of money. Europe and frankly the rest of the world can. So I do think the subsidy train has to slow down. I don't think we can indefinitely
Okay.
throw a lot of this money. We're seeing these challenges, for example, in Canada. An offer was made to LG Stellantis, a combination to make batteries in Southwestern Ontario, where I'm from, last year, and there was a deal was agreed. Once a few months later, another deal was signed with Volkswagen. This was post IRA, with a lot more generous subsidies on the table. So LG Chem and Stellantis come back to the government and say, well, actually, for us to follow through on our investment, we're going to need more money from you. So that's politically very difficult, I think, for the government to say, well, we've signed a deal, here's more capital, and definitely it can bleed out. And it's also not economically the most optimal way to spur an industrial strategy. What you really want to do is you want to build infrastructure, you want to build ports, you want to make sure they have power. And that comes to the real big issue of what Europe in particular is going to come up ahead is power shortages and power prices. It's one thing to run an office, it's one thing to be a consultant. We're not very energy intensive people, but to manufacture steel or chemicals, huge quantities of energy that are not really available in the EU ever since Russian gas flows were curtailed. That those aren't coming back soon. LNG has picked up, but that is a tighter market, especially as Chinese economy fully recovers from COVID and this lockdown. Energy demand is going to get tight again. Next winter is far from solved. So we're going to have limits there. What the West needs to do collectively is it needs to start expanding its industrial supply chains to non-aligned countries that do have tremendous energy resources that haven't been developed and haven't been put to use, and have those countries take on a larger share of the energy-intensive downstream and midstream parts of the industrial process. So that means instead of bringing over the raw materials to Germany or France and processing them there, we're going to have to leave a much larger portion of that downstream activity in parts of Africa, Latin America, and non-aligned parts of Asia, where they can't take on a larger share of the load. Same thing with labor. We don't have that many mechanical, talented, skilled tradesmen and women available throughout the West anymore. They've all took on humanities degrees and make podcasts. So we're well stocked on those, but we do need a labor supply that isn't available for reindustrialization. The priority here has to be a decoupling from China and saying, instead of looking for China for our labor industrial supply, we have to look at alternative options throughout the rest of the developing world. It also is critical because that helps them bring into our economic orbit again, and giving them opportunities instead of just being resource extraction facilities. I think that's going to be a great bedrock for us to have closer economic and political ties as well.
And do you see this at the at which part of the supply chain? Because obviously, so recently I had someone on the podcast that was talking about the opportunities for LNG exports from Israel, and there are a lot of creatives, ideas out there. So when you look for these solutions, is this just from what's the what's the preferred way? Do you buy the end product? Do you kind of really go down and because there's a lot of upfront investment obviously to be made, right?
Where we have to do is we have to be a bit more critical in thinking about industrial strategy, where there are certain countries that can seize the upper end of the value chain. Germany is obviously a lot of experience with cars, struggling with that transition with EVs per se, was a slower mover on that compared to, say, China. Here in the UK, huge opportunity in the hydrogen space. So electrolyzers and fuel cells, something that we can dominate in or be very competitive in as well. Obviously, Denmark is a pioneer of wind turbines and has continued to be in that space. So I think there's nothing wrong, and I think it's essential that some of the Western allies start getting together and discussing, allocating up the pie of which countries do we really want to see being leaders in some different green industrial sectors, supporting those supply chains. Where we do have other countries, for example, there's a conversation about shipping out hydrogen as ammonia from Namibia up into Western Europe. That to me doesn't make much sense because you're going to lose a tremendous amount of that energy in the journey. Instead, produce that ammonia and then consume it in Namibia. Set up the refining facility, set up the steel production facility or the lower end value chain there, and then export a more finished product or a more higher up the value chain product to Germany, where it can be assembled and put into final use. So that's something that politically we have distorted in a way, because a lot of these kind of steel production jobs, very photogenic politically. You want to support these communities. A lot of these factories are one factory towns. So huge political polls to be made to support those. But the thinking has to be, how can we convert that steel facility into a more advanced, electrolyzer fuel cell facility, and work with a developing nation trade partner for them to take on a larger share of our supply chain as well.